Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of UBS Road to the Election, an Election Watch series. I'm really thrilled to welcome today's guest, Paul Aaron, co-founder and CEO of Addition. Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we brought you here today. We've had conversations in the past here about this wild story about Lebanon essentially putting into the presidential seat an AI. And the backstory is 2 years without a president, and the government couldn't figure out who to put in the seat, and it took a newspaper in the country, An-Nahar, to say, we'll take care of this. So talk to us about your involvement in that, what it took, why it happened, and how it's going.
Yeah, it's a wild story. And when we first found out about the project, it was a little bit head-scratching. There's an ad agency that we have a relationship out of the New York office, BBDO, and they have an office in Dubai, and they've been working very closely with An-Nahar on some, kind of different political activations over the past few years. And as you mentioned, the country's been without a president for well over a year now. And so they asked us if we could train an AI on 90 years of investigative journalism to be essentially the president.
No small feat on your part or BBDO's, I'm sure.
Yeah. And as we dug into it, I think what I found really fascinating was just kind of the provocative questions that the project was kind of asking about the role of technology and governance. And I think oftentimes we think about AI as being incredibly biased, but in a situation where there's this political vacuum, could you create an AI that's actually better than the alternative, right?
Right.
And the bar was fairly low. That was kind of the backdrop for how we got involved and why we got involved.
It's such an incredible story in the way that what I loved, I read a quote by the editor-in-chief of An-Nahar, and she said essentially, the government could not get their act together for almost 2 years, so the people essentially had to step in and then put a computer, AI, in the seat. So it took the government not acting for the people to then get a large language model to act as the president. And it's a wild story and how it all circuitously came together. How's it going, by the way? I know it really only you launched it sometime in March of this year, and it's only a couple of months technically in office, if you want to call it that. How's it going?
Yeah, it's been generating a lot of discussion, and I think that's really the point, right? So, there's not necessarily the intention that the AI president is going to ascend to power, and we're not advocating that. We're not there yet with the technology, and hopefully we never will be. But it's creating a conversation, right? So it's creating a dialogue. It's putting pressure on political leaders to have more honest and open conversations about how to move the country forward. And one thing recently is some members of the Lebanese parliament actually brought the AI president into parliament, and they used it to generate hypothetical solutions to problems that then they just put on the floor for debate.
Wow.
It's not only facilitating discussion within the media and within the sort of the public sphere, but also within the government itself, which is what it's supposed to be doing.
Right, and as you say, this is all the AI is essentially doing is reporting on 90 years of data that was fed into this large language model for these hypotheticals or these real world scenarios that they're asking of it or looking to it for advice. So it's fed by history, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. So there's these ways of aligning AI with data. I'm not going to go into too many details, but the long and short of it is it's using all of the historical information that An-Nahar has been reporting on since the 1930s to understand the history of the country, to understand the current events that the country is facing. And then, of course, it also has a very powerful large language model that understands kind of the state of affairs across the globe, right? And it's able to kind of triangulate those things, right, using kind of the sort of brain power of a large language model with the factual and historical information of the 90 years of journalism to come up with some pretty compelling solutions. And what's interesting about the solutions is they're very practical, right? They're straightforward. They're pragmatic in a lot of ways. We're not yet at a point with the tech that it can, predict the future, and they're not guaranteed to work. But they're the types of solutions that have been lacking, at least, from my understanding, in terms of the government today, right? There's just a lot of sectarianism. There's a lot of corruption. And so you set up an AI this way, and it's actually able to kind of, not necessarily be biased towards one point of view, and to not be beholden to special interests.
Right. It almost also feels like it's something along the lines of where the AI can give a response, and maybe that's a seed, or maybe more than a seed, of an idea that then members of parliament can then run with and say, okay, great, that's a great start. Now let's continue the discussion with the humans in the room. That's just one application of it. And you made a really good point. We were talking last week or so, and you kind of equated it to people I think are scared of AI, like, oh, the machines are going to take over. You said, no, it's not Skynet, which is a Terminator reference, but also it's kind of like akin to the internet in the 90s. Nobody would imagine that back in 1994 that members of the US government or any other government would use the internet for information. But now it seems almost like if you don't, what are you doing? You need to use it, and it's expected that you would. So it almost seems like AI is on track to become that in the world of information gathering and idea creation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, we're seeing this across a number of different sectors, right? Which is the kind of hybridization of like humans and machines working together in new ways, powered by these new technologies that have been coming out. And I think that that can happen in government, right? Like, government is notoriously opaque. In many cases relies on civic engagement, but civic engagement has been kind of breaking and falling apart over the last many years in this country and around the world. It relies on being able to seek out and find high quality information and synthesize that together. And these are things that the technology can actually do a really good job with, right? And for all the talk about, AI is going to, sort of create this horrible dystopian future for politics. I think there's also an alternative view where it helps us to make more informed decisions faster. It, creates a tighter feedback loop between the population and its leaders, and ultimately this kind of hybridization of government and the people and AI can actually, if applied correctly, solve a lot of the issues that we have in governance.
Yeah, there are lots of stories that are out there now about AI and like the hallucination factor, which is where it's pulling information that's either incomplete or just completely wrong. There was a very quick story where in New York State there was a criminal case where the prosecutor was pulling evidence directly from AI, but it was pulling hallucinated information, and the judge knew the case that it was referring to and said that never happened. So there are those cases where AI thinks it's pulling information from a reputable source, but it could be biased or it could be incomplete. So that's always a factor where human beings have to say, all right, this is a good start, but let me do my research on this.
Don't get me wrong. The challenges that come with AI are very real, right? In terms of deep fakes, misinformation, so forth. The ability for AI to be very persuasive, for example, and potentially using that persuasive power for some kind of ill intent. A lot of that really also comes down to humans and how we use AI, right? It comes down to like the decisions we make in terms of how we're going to use this technology to create new information or to create misinformation. And so, I think there's new norms and standards that are going to start to emerge, and the safety discussion is important because it's going to help make that happen. It's going to help sort of put pressure on technology companies like ours and others to use the tech responsibly. But I think on the other hand, there's this incredible opportunity, right, for the technology to have a really positive impact when used intelligently, right? Like hallucinations can be mitigated with good data, right? And so that's more of a design and implementation choice. And the ChatGPT lawyer that you referenced, right? Like that was a little bit of a failure of the tech, but it was also a failure. It was a user error, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of brings us to that that part of the conversation that I say to you, which is obviously humans are feeding the data into the chat GPTs and large language models, and they are only as good as the data that humans are putting in there. But then does that then, as the data gets better and the large language models get better, does it eventually make the humans better on the other side of it? In other words, do we, as AI grows and gets better, does it make humans better in the way that we process information and use information and live our lives?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thought experiment, right? And if we look at the impact that the internet has had, right, over the past 30 years or so, a lot of really positive things have come out of the web, right? And sure, there's a dark side. Every foundational disruptive technology has positive and negative impacts.
That's
but
right.
I think the positive impact in terms of our society and our ability to collectively solve problems and to sort of have global communication and things that are really positive in terms of our ability to to kind of evolve as a global society have been profound. And I think as we think about the role that AI is going to have in terms of this kind of hybridization and the ability for us to make better, smarter decisions faster as a group, I think that's huge. I think that should not be underestimated.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it can help with efficiencies in every aspect of our culture, whether it's business or government or even education. I think obviously now we're still in the early phases, but ChatGPT and other large language models are growing and getting better, and now they're sitting presidents of countries. So I love the story of how this fits into in sort of our show, Road to the Election, as this is not necessarily the future of the American government, but how AI could potentially help enhance the skills and the knowledge that even our politicians locally have, and using those large language models to make decisions or come up with really good ideas. So thanks for sharing with us, Paul. And congratulations. I would love to hear more from you in a couple months to see how it's going with the Lebanese AI president. But thanks for sharing the story with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Great, good to have you. And thank you again to Paul Aaron and Edition. And for more information on this series, please visit our website at ubs.com/election watch. There are plenty of other episodes in the series there, plus a lot of other election-related content. And if you'd like to continue this conversation, make sure you're reaching out to your UBS financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great day, everybody.